Welcome to the Equipping You in Grace podcast. We are so excited that you are joining us for the show today. This podcast aims to explore a biblical life view in a conversational tone. Let's join our host and founder of Servants of Grace, Dave Jenkins, for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening.
Welcome back to the Equipping You in Grace podcast. My name is Dave, and I'm the host for this podcast. And today we have a bit of a special episode. My buddy Joey Tomlinson is going to talk with me, ask me some questions about my past, about depression and anxiety, triggers that I have, and those types of things, how to deal with it, what help I've gotten on this topic, and those kind of things. Joey, welcome to the Equipping You in Grace podcast. Would you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do ministry-wise, and maybe a little bit about your education?
Absolutely, brother. Thank you for having me on. We were praying right before we pressed record, and I was just thinking as I was praying, like, how long have we known each other now?
I really don't know.
I don't either.
Probably like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. So no, thank you for having me on. Yep, my name is Joey Tomlinson. I'm over on the other side of the states here.
The wrong coast.
On the wrong coast. I live over in Yorktown, Virginia, and I am a pastor at a local church here, a local Baptist church, and Coastal Community Church, and I have been here on staff for about 14 years, and am pastor. I'm a biblical counselor, and got my education from Southern Seminary. Just finished a doctorate of ministry there in biblical counseling, and have a beautiful wife and named Braden, little boy named Henry Jacob, and another one that's showing up here in about 3 weeks, Lord willing, named Owen. So extremely blessed and grateful to God. And I have wrestled with depression and anxiety in my own life as well. And Dave and I have exchanged information, info about this issue. And Dave graciously offered to give me a little bit about his story. And as we talked through potentially doing that, it kind of progressed to, hey, let's turn this into a podcast. So thanks for being willing to let me interrogate you, brother.
I'm ready for the hot seat.
You're usually on the other side of this, right?
That's right. I've been interviewed a few times, but not as nearly as much as I've put people on the hot seat and uncomfortable.
Well, you'll have to give me grace because I have never interviewed anyone. This is my first time asking a bunch of questions to somebody on a podcast. So
you'll do great.
So we'll see what happens. So I guess I'll just dive in if that's all right.
Go for it.
All right. So probably the ground level question that we need to deal with is just like give us a little bit about the history of your own personal struggle with depression and anxiety.
Yeah. Well, I won't go too far into that because I could literally talk to you for hours and nobody wants to listen for hours. So we'll give you a brief summary, our listeners. Well, when I was little, I was diagnosed with ADD. I was put on Ritalin from my very early childhood. I'm not sure exactly what age. I had a lot of energy. In my early teens, I was taken off Ritalin. I was put on Depakote and Wellbutrin and Zoloft. I was about a freshman in high school at this time. I was diagnosed with ADD, bipolar, for depression and anxiety. My mom was concerned at the time that I was suicidal because of my parents getting divorced and those types of things around this time, and had no motivation or desire to do anything. At the age of 17, I was taken off all of this medicine by a friend, my middle brother. She was a very experienced nurse. She felt, given her years and years of experience working in hospitals, that I didn't have any of those. None of those diagnoses were correct. ADD, ADHD, bipolar. Within a month, my behavior leveled out. It changed. I remember I played varsity golf my junior year, and the golf coach walked up to me. We would talk every day and all those things, and he would ask me what was different about me. He noticed, and others were noticing after I got off the medicine, a positive difference in my behavior, just my overall demeanor and those types of things. I haven't been on medicine since that time. I'm 38, so coming up here on, I guess it has been a little over 20 years now of not being on any medication at all. And just to be clear, I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying I'm not a psychiatrist or anything like that. So I'm not advocating that you get off medicine if you're on that medicine. There's people that need that. I'm just saying, like, I didn't need it, and I've been off it for a long time, and I don't have any problems. So I told my golf coach at the time in my junior year, I told him, no, I'm no longer on any medicine. Well, he said whatever the change was, it was very positive, and others were noticing a difference in my mood and my behavior and all those things. Throughout my 20s and 30s, I'm 38 now, I struggled with depression and anxiety. It's continued with various periods where I'm good and various periods where I'm not. We're going to get into things that have helped me, but in the past 2 years since moving from southern Idaho to California, my depression and anxiety seems to have gotten better. I seem to probably have had a seasonal affective disorder. So, I lacked certain vitamins and those types of things probably. The only thing I can contribute to that or whatever, and I'm not a PhD or psychiatrist, is that like I said, I had a seasonal affective disorder. And all the sun I'm getting down here in Southern California really helps. Like even when I was up recently in Seattle, I could tell a difference. So I'm not sure what all that is about, and I honestly don't really care, but I just know that I feel better overall when I have lots of sun and those kinds of things, and so that really helps.
Yeah, that's good. I actually hear about seasonal affective disorder pretty regularly in relation to depression specifically, and so I was curious as to you moving out to California with the extra vitamin D and the good weather and being able to be outside all the time, if that did have a positive impact on you. So I have a coworker friend of mine who she used to live in Florida, and Florida doesn't have as consistent of good weather as California does, but there's a lot more sun. It's the sunshine state, and she has noticed a difference between in regards to her emotions living in Florida versus living here in the state of Virginia too. So in those seasons, even just over the last couple of years, like when you feel anxious or when you begin to feel depressed, like what are some of the triggers that you have found surrounding that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, one big one has always been money, and obviously stress is one of them. And another huge one has been family issues. So when I feel stressed, I will. Now that I'm in a better climate, I'll go out and I'll hit golf balls. That really helps me. Or go on a walk and listen to music. Or I do read a lot, as no doubt people know. But I don't read as much as people think. It would actually surprise people how little I actually do. Huh?
Just like 6 books a day?
No. But when I do read, I probably read a couple books a day. So there's that. I do read very fast. I always have, and always have been able to retain what I read for the most part. So don't quiz me on that. But But family issues have definitely can be cause for depression and anxiety. We'll talk about open and honest communication, but that really has been a big thing for me. Trust, because of my family past and the pain I've experienced and those kind of things has been a huge thing for me. So learning to trust people was big, and those kinds of things because of my past. And so yeah, when I get triggered or whatever, I just have to go pray and like everybody, and a lot of it is just realizing what your triggers are. So I think that a lot of Christians, they may not even know like what triggers them, or what that even looks like. I think having people that know what their triggers are helps, and then you can ask them like, how do you know what triggers you? How do you know when well, for me, that I feel like when I get anxious or, for example, I'll really tighten up a lot. So my mood will change. I'm normally pretty even-keeled and easygoing, but when I get really stressed and triggered, complete opposite. Leave me alone. I mean, lots of time to be alone and just get back in a good frame of mind. I think that's true for all of us. When I'm depressed, that's harder. That one has been harder. There'll be periods where, I mean, just like the other day, I was depressed for no real reason other than I felt like it was spiritual warfare, and there's a lot of that in my life, and I just woke up in a really foul mood for whatever reason, and it just didn't go away, and I just realized, a lot of that is just spiritual warfare, and so I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, it's super helpful. So what would if we were interviewing Sarah, what would she say are some things that she notices about you in those seasons of anxiety or seasons of depressions, and then how does she help care for you?
A lot of the time she'll recognize it before I do. A lot of the time I don't recognize it at the time, but she's extra patient. She'll be extra patient. I might be less than patient, or it's like when I get burnt out, I know like my emotions feel extra crispy, extra I'm probably more extra sensitive or those kind of things, and so she just helps me, and I'm like, well, I'll ask her like what she'll either tell me, or I'll ask, well, what are you seeing, or whatever, and she's like, a lot of it is just, for me, a lot of it is spiritual warfare. So I'll start believing Satan's lies that I'm, and I know this isn't true, that I'm worthless, and I'm searching for a pastor job, and so that's a big thing for me. I don't have that position, and as we've talked about over text, those kind of things. So she just encourages me, you're doing a good job, which I hear all the time, and I believe that, I give thanks to God for that, but it's still, the reality of it, and trusting God's timing and His plan and purpose and those things. So
that's good. So what have you found to be some healthy coping mechanisms?
Well, this will surprise probably no one that knows me well. Bible reading has been huge. And by that, I mean reading the Bible every day. Some people think that's legalistic to say, and I think that it's absolutely critical that we read the Bible, to get into God's Word, to hear what He has to say to us. I'm a big advocate of friends, close friends, so being open and honest. The basic Christian things that we could say, regular local church attendance, serving the Lord wherever you are, reading godly books, no surprise, exercising. So for me, that is walking. I in the past 5 years, open and honest communication with trusted Christian friends has really helped me a lot. But I can also say that I can tend to swing more towards talking to somebody about stuff because of my personality, and less about spending time in prayer about it.
That's good.
So there's a balance there. I would say since moving to California, especially being away from the large support group that I had in Southern Idaho, that has become, I probably swung a little bit more towards just praying. You could never really go wrong with that. So I spend more time praying about it than I do probably talking about it. But that doesn't mean that I don't talk about it with trusted Christian friends either. So preaching the gospel to myself from the Word has been really, learning about that from, the Puritans. Joe Thorne has a book on it. Praying the Word, Don Whitney. That has just been huge for me. And then another thing that's always been helpful is good worship music. So like Shane and Shane, I listen to them a lot. Those kind of guys. Beautiful Eulogy. I might listen to some others, but I listen to a lot of Shane and Shane, and that seems to help. So
what's a favorite album? What's a favorite Shane album you like?
I like the new one, Hymns.
That's a great album.
Yeah.
Love some Shane and Shane. What are there, when you do Bible reading, especially during those seasons of depression and anxiety, have you found particular passages to be comforting?
Certainly there have been periods where I'll go through the Psalms, Psalm 40 and 42, other Psalms, or just reading Scripture in general, thinking about it, whether right now I'm studying 1 Samuel, so just reading that over and over again is what I like to do, or just other passages, whatever I'm in, it's just helpful. If there's a specific thing that I feel like I need to study, I'll do that, a particular topic where I think I need to dig deeper into that, think about some more, I'll do that. But by and large, no, I don't do that so much anymore. I used to. Not that I have it all figured out at all, but I just, I'm not at that. I don't really feel like I need to do that. So
I would imagine that some of the listeners may be wondering, when you talk about a trusted Christian friend, like being in community, during those times of depression and anxiety, like what does it look like to be in community? Like what are the things that you're saying to those friends? What are the things that you're asking for? And what have you found to be helpful to hear from those friends, and even unhelpful at times to hear from those friends?
That's a good question. I'm looking for the kind of friend that I could trust. So, somebody that shows an interest, somebody that obviously has the same sort of basic, has some spiritual maturity, maybe some theological education, somebody that I can actually talk to about these things and they understand what I'm talking about, so I don't have to give a lot of the background and explain anything. Some things not to do. Don't sympathize if you don't actually struggle with it. I think every case of depression is different. There's different types of severity. Like I would say previously my depression was severe. Look at the medication I was on. The doctors thought it was pretty severe. They put to put this in language that people can describe, and I was told this. The level of medicine that I was on was the kind of medicine that they would put a cancer patient about to die on. So that was the kind of my depression was severe, and so I wasn't the typical person, wasn't the typical person that just struggled with it. But I do want to say every case of depression is different, and just because I've made the mistake in counseling friends, I'm like, well, this is my experience, and maybe superimpose that on them, and that's not really that helpful. Even if you do have that experience with depression, that's not helpful. I would say I'm sorry to hear that, and maybe ask lots of questions like you're doing, and just figure out what's going on. Try to provide some medicine. I think the biggest thing that a person can do is just to listen. And that's hard, to sit and to listen. As men, we want to provide answers, but as Christians, we can sit and not give an answer to anybody and just say, I'm sorry. I'm just here to listen, and let me pray for you. Let me give you a hug. That breaks down so many walls, and at least for me, it makes me want to open up to that person more.
Yeah.
So if that's somebody, I'm not saying like you never say anything or anything like that. I'm just saying like we need to, I think a less advice and counsel is better. And then if you can't help that person, just do that. Just say, hey, and let the person know, I don't really have anything to say to you other than to pray and to listen to you, but I'm more than happy to do that for you, and maybe encourage that person to go to somebody that has like yourself, more biblical counseling, or maybe they need to go to a doctor and recognize, hey, medicine isn't bad. Some people think that it's bad, even in the biblical counseling world, I know, and God in His common grace gives doctors wisdom, and medicine can be helpful. It also can be very bad. So I could talk a long time about that, but I think that people need a lot more wisdom, and to be less focused on that, and we need to walk with one another. We need to take I guess what I'm saying is each case is different, each person is different, so we need to be much slower on that, and to provide a more individualized care rather than a cookie cutter approach.
That's good.
What do you think?
No, I agree with a lot of that. I have found that people can be very quick to speak, right? And so there's a piece where we may need to lean into James and be slow to speak, and we need to hear people, and we need to listen generously to people. And I have found that the longer I listen to people, the better equipped I am to care for them and to love them, and to remind them of who they are in Christ. And I don't want to give opinions that aren't grounded in the Word. And I think sometimes, especially in relation to depression and anxiety, there's so many opinions out there.
Right.
You mentioned one about medication, right?
Yeah.
There's loads of opinions about medication. And I love one of the things you said earlier. We're not medical doctors. We're not psychiatrists. And so I don't want to pretend to try to be some sort of expert on that. But regardless, if we're wrestling with biological depression or anxiety or some other type of depression and anxiety, we all need to be counseled from the Word. We need to weep with those who weep, mourn with those who mourn, link arms with brothers and sisters, sisters and do life with them. And I have found just in my own life, particular brothers and sisters, my wife included in that have cared for me. Some of the best moments of care for me have been when they have just sat with me and didn't even say anything. They just sat, and that ministered to me more than they'll ever know. I didn't feel rushed. I didn't feel like I had to even rush past my grief. I felt like I could grieve, and they wouldn't reject me. And there's something that feels safe about that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all of that. I just don't. There's some Christians like I went through a period where I was totally against medicine, but I don't think that we can be totally against medicine. But I also am not saying that medicine is the solution. It's
Sure.
not. It's a tool. It's a tool that God can use, but it's not the first thing that we should use. We just need to be careful about it, and because our secular culture. I mean, I could say a lot. They dump kids today. They just put them on medicine because they get the doctor gets more money, and so we have to be more careful with medicine as Christians and really think on a case by case basis. If that person actually, if what we're saying isn't helping, there might be more going on, and so that's all I'm trying to say there, and not
That's good.
other than what I agree absolutely with what you said. So
I've found that in the secular world there's an overemphasis on the body, and there's no acknowledgement of the soul. And then sometimes in the local church capacity, there's the rightful acknowledgement of the soul, and there's an underemphasis or neglect of the body.
Yes.
And a truly Christian approach is to acknowledge both body and soul. And so that's the only way I think we're balanced. So thank you for the warning and encouragement. So speaking of local churches, and this may be, we run into similar answers to what we just finished teasing out, but for those people that are connected to local churches that are listening, which I hope is most people,
me too.
What can local churches do to care for our brothers and sisters that are struggling in this area?
Well, my answer will surprise you not at all. It starts with the leadership of the church, a plurality of elders. So in talking about depression and anxiety, I think it would be helpful if preachers, Bible teachers, those who are in leadership would share personally how they've struggled with anxiety and depression in appropriate ways, which I could talk about as well. That way people don't feel like they're all alone. A lot of people just come and they feel all alone, that nobody understands. Nobody's gone through what I'm in, and we've talked about that. Or if they haven't struggled, having somebody from the congregation share before the sermon about their struggle with anxiety and depression, that could be helpful. Maybe that could be recorded and be brief. I just a thought. And the reason that's important is that depression and anxiety, they thrive in darkness. So bringing it out into the light is absolutely essential. We talked about open and honest communication. That starts best with the leadership of the church and creating a safe place for strugglers to come out in the open.
Yeah, I mean, I was you and I were talking before we recorded. I was telling you that our local church is finishing a 4-week series on emotions in the Christian life, and one of the weeks we spent an entire sermon working through depression and anxiety from a biblical worldview. And this Sunday night we are gonna work through some questions that our members submitted to deal with the topic, and I have been encouraged by how many people this series has ministered to, just because the subject has been taboo for so long in local churches, and people are I think encouraged by the fact that the church is dealing with it, because if the church doesn't deal with it, there's a vacuum, and vacuums always get filled with something. And so we want our local church to have a biblical worldview.
That's good.
Yeah.
What do you think that looks like for a pastor to talk about that? What do you think? I know there's a lot of different opinions on that as well, but what do you think that would look like?
So I preached the sermon on depression and anxiety here, and I did actually start off by sharing some of my story and my own wrestle with it, and it was I was surprised surprised by how many people reached out to me and told me how engaged and approachable this sermon was, because I shared that story right out of the gate. And so I think it allowed them the freedom to confess, allowed them the freedom to talk about it even in their own small group capacity when they were working through the sermon. And so and then I just worked through Psalm 77, Psalm of Asaph, and worked through what how the Psalms can give us language around our depressions. And I think our body was really encouraged by it.
That's awesome.
So last couple of questions here. I just wanted to see if you had some, like, what are some of the best books you've read on depression and anxiety, and what are some good website resources that you would point folks toward?
Well, website resources, Dr. David Murray has a whole list of books and articles. You can go over to his website at headhearthand.org/blog. Click search for depression and anxiety. You can find a lot of articles from all over the internet, all sorts of perspectives on it. Books. Well, David Murray has a great book. I haven't heard any real negative feedback on it. Christians Get Depressed Too. Running Scared, Fear, Worry, and the God of Rest by Ed Welsh. Anxiety, Anatomy and Cure by Dr. Bob Kellerman. Depression, Looking Up from the Stubborn Darkness by Ed Welsh. Of course, the classics. Spiritual Depression, Its Causes and Cure by Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones.
Yeah, those are great books.
Any that I missed in adding?
Yeah, I recommend all of those. And a couple one that I read recently, Depression, Anxiety, and the Christian Life. I don't agree with absolutely everything in that book, but there's some really helpful ways that Baxter cared for people in his congregation that wrestled with depression, and I have found it to be helpful in regards to giving people some handles on how to care for people with depression and anxiety. So that's a good book, published by Crossway as well.
Oh, good.
Good stuff. Well, Dave, thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast, man, and letting me put you in the hot seat for a change.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope that you were encouraged by today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you get your podcast. For more uplifting and thought-provoking content, please visit us online at servantsofgrace.org. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Servants of Grace, and on Facebook at facebook.com/servantsofgrace. We hope you have a blessed day, and we will see you next time.